Even on bended knee, I'm standing tall. Rather stand for my beliefs than not fight it all. Take a stance here with me, I won't let you fall. 'Cause together we can voice it out and win overall. Yeah, together we can voice it out and tell them all. You can't wrong my rights, 'cause I know them all. You can't wrong my rights, I stand for them all. You can't wrong my rights, I know them all. Can't wrong my rights, I know them all. Can't wrong my rights, I know them all. I know them all. Here on this battlefield, aiming for change. If we march loud enough, we can pave the way. Maybe dark come, but we see brighter days. Yeah, together we can voice it out and make a way. Yeah, together we can voice it out and all say, you can't wrong my rights, 'cause I know them all. You can't wrong my rights, I stand for them all. You can't wrong my rights, I know them all. Can't wrong my rights, I know them all. Can't wrong my rights, I know them all. I know them all. We won't let fear stop us from what we have to say. So many need to speak and won't let it be in vain. We could take a stance now and nevermore. Oh yeah, right now we can voice it out and tell them all. You can't wrong my rights, 'cause I know them all. No, you can't wrong my rights, I stand for them all. You can't wrong my rights, I know them all. Can't wrong my rights, I know them all. Can't wrong my rights, I know them all. I know them all.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Marsha R, and I am a Senior Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Human Resources Consultant at MRW Consulting Group International. We are so happy that you decided to join us this evening. I would like to welcome you to the film screening of Burden and the panel conversation with members of MRW Consulting Group. But before we get started, I'd like to take care of a few housekeeping details. First off, if you are on Zoom on your desktop, in the right-hand corner, you will find a couple of boxes. If you click on that box and you go to speaker view, and this will enhance your experience during this conversation. So let me slow down a little bit. Go to the corner, hit speaker view, and then you will be able to enhance your experience with us this evening. So I hope some of you will be able to do that. Also, we want to let you know that if time permits, we will do our best to answer some questions from our chat. We do have a full program, but we also find that very, very important to do. So if the opportunity presents itself, that's exactly what we'll do. However, if we run out of time, we will invite you to join us today, and you'll receive a feedback survey. In that survey, you'll be able to ask us any questions and give us some information that will help us going forward as we continue to move the film burden forward and the work of MRW Consulting Group International, LLC. And I want to mention something. We've got one shy member. Well, he's kind of shy. His name is Richard L. Pelzer. And although he's not on the, oh, let me get that right, Mr. Richard E. Pelzer II, right? He's one of the executive producers of Burden. And we just wanted to make sure that he was acknowledged and recognized today as part of the DEI Collective. So at this time, I would like to turn the stage over to Mr. Nathan Hale Williams, who is the writer and director of the film you are going to see tonight. And again, welcome to Burden. Nathan?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Nathan Hale Williams, and I am the writer and director of the film you're going to see tonight called Burden. It is my extreme honor and pleasure to partner with the DEI Collective to bring you this film and the opportunities that surround it. I wrote this film because I felt that there needed to be a conversation around what it was like to walk a day in the life and the shoes of a Black man in America. But this story is not just about Black men. This is about all marginalized groups who have felt othered in our society. I know that film and entertainment have a way of creating empathy and creating a space to have a dialogue around these very tough issues. For the past year, we've been all over this country, both in person and virtually, sharing this story and talking about all kinds of bias, unconscious bias, conscious bias, and those things that I call blind spots that we all have. We have used this film in partnership with Fortune 200 companies, with law firms, with community organizations, and more to spark a great conversation and much needed dialogue around race, bias, and diversity, equity, and inclusion in our country. So we hope that you will enjoy the film, see its utility in being able to spark these conversations, and also partner with the DEI Collective to bring this programming to your organization or your community. Without further ado, this is our film, Burden.
Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary, baby.
You're living in poverty.
But don't be late.
Promise.
Your schools are no good. You have no jobs.
Take the ticket. If you want to dispute it, I'll see you in court.
Oh, I get it. Wakanda forever.
Looking for some diamond earrings for an anniversary gift?
I hated to even ask. You know how it is. Always harder on us.
I know.
Ooh, don't go all South Central on me. I moved your stuff over there.
I could be Superman, but
I appreciate you, but I don't need a mentor.
I could be Superman, but I don't know how. I could be Superman.
Good evening again. My name is Marsha R, and I am a senior DEI HR professional with MRW Consulting Group. And of course, I would like to welcome you to this conversation tonight. My burden is your burden. Activism and advocacy through storytelling. You can't wrong my rights. That's what we'll be discussing and talking a little bit about today, as we also talk about the services that MRW Consulting Group offers during these tumultuous times in the DEI space. So first, let me introduce my colleagues. Joining me tonight will be Muriel Watkins. who is the president and founder of MRW Consulting Group.
Good evening, everyone.
Then we Good evening, Muriel. Thank you for being here with me. But of course you would be. And then we have Mr. Chuck Peck, who's a senior DEI Collective consultant. Hello, Chuck.
Good evening.
Good evening. And then we also have Mr. Jeffrey Gardia, better known as America's Psychologist. Hello, Jeffrey. Dr. Jeff.
Yes, good evening, everyone.
I am fine, sir. Good evening. And last but surely not least, we have Mark M.K., the Director of Entertainment Production for the DEI Collective. Mark?
How are you?
Excellent, thank you. Well, listen, I want to talk to my panelists this evening, and we are going to have what I like to believe is going to be an engaging conversation with you, full of information and insight about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what we as a DEI collective are doing to attempt to move the needle and change mindsets and hearts. So, Mark, I'd like to start with you. You are clearly an amazing performing artist, and your song, Can't Wrong My Rights, is extremely powerful and a welcomed addition to the DEI Collective's professional creative expression catalog. Now, as the Director of Entertainment Production, offering socially conscious, customized music for the organizations looking to innovatively advance their DEI collectives, I have a question for you. Can you tell us why you have chosen to use your musical platform as a vehicle to advocate for human rights and social justice in the work environment, and how you might customize songs for DEI client campaigns? Can you talk a little bit about that for us, please?
Sure can, but let me begin with saying thank you, Marsha, and thank you to my team, my DEI Collective. I appreciate you guys so much for creating such a beautiful experience tonight. Thank you to Richard and Nathan for conveying such a beautiful message for your film Burden. My burden is your burden is one of my favorite lines. And also thank you to everybody attending us, this experience tonight. You could have been anywhere else in the world, virtually, but you're with us tonight. So I just want to thank you for that. But to answer your question, Marsha, music is a very powerful tool. Music is a very powerful tool. It could be used to lead an army into battle during war. It could be used to lead a team down the field for a championship. And it can also unite people from all walks of life and celebrities when it comes to singing a song like We Are the World. I chose to amplify, unity through music and call out the bias and unconscious bias. I chose to create songs like Don't Feel Lost, which shines a light on mental health awareness, telling people if you need help, it's okay to talk to someone. It's okay to seek the help that you need. It's okay to, talk to a close friend, a family member, or leave your desk at work and talk to someone in HR. I created Can't Wrong My Rights, which we all heard a little earlier, shining light on voices, allowing people to express themselves, telling people that it's okay to let your voice, sing out loud and express yourself and not be muffled. Whether you're inside or outside that important room, it should be heard. And when they are inside that important room, it's now for everybody inside that important room, executives, whosoever, to now acknowledge that voice as well. I'm so happy and proud of this DEI team, the DEI Collective, because it gives me a chance to actually amplify unity by the beat of the drum as well. With one soundtrack, a soundtrack to your life, a soundtrack to your business, your corporation, your company, we could create an environment of togetherness, unity. We could blur lines, mix paints, all by the sound of the drum. I'll finish with, with this. if you could turn to music therapy for your personal needs, and I'm going to make this clear. Some people may or may not believe in music therapy, but the minute you listen to a song and it makes you happy, it changes that dull feeling, that dull moment. The minute you remember a lyric and it does something to you, you are now experiencing music therapy, whether you believe it or not. So if you could turn to music therapy for your personal needs, you should be able to turn to music therapy for your business needs as well.
Wow. So what, should I just drop the mic? And what would you like me to do, Mark? Listen, you are a powerful musician. You know, and when you said that just now, one song came to mind along with yours. We are the world. You know, we are the world, we are the children. We are the ones who make a brighter day. So let's start giving.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, and that's what we're trying to do as it relates to the DEI Collective. And your song brings it home in so many different ways. And the fact that we are an agency that will be able to customize music for organizations who are interested in being creative in how they move their DEI efforts forward is a powerful attribute that you bring to the fabric of our agency. So we are so happy to have you as part of our team. But let me not banter too long, as I definitely want to talk to Dr. Jeffrey Gardia. We call him Dr. Jeff. Now, Dr. Jeff, you are considered America's psychologist, and your work often speaks to the trauma that individuals are facing as they go about their daily lives, like Bennett Lewis in Burden. Individuals bring their whole selves to the work environment, and that's just, sir, an inescapable fact. Can you please provide us with some insight into how you support companies in recognizing and addressing self-care needs for their employees? What do they need to know, and how do you help them to come to know it, sir?
Well, first of all, good evening to everyone. I must tell you where Bennett works. It may seem like a bit of a stereotype or a bit hyperbole, but that really does happen. Perhaps we don't have people who may be as loud or as stupid as that CEO, but certainly sometimes implicit bias can scream with microaggressions that hurt as much, if not worse, than someone who's a loudmouth. But I think, first of all, if we're talking about the institutions themselves, we know of a term called institutional racism, systemic racism. And that's very powerful. That unconscious racism becomes the brick and mortar of our society, but also of our companies. So it is really incumbent on our companies to not just hire the most qualified individuals who are often underrepresented minorities, but how to retain them, how to keep them, how to not insult or hurt them. So we see what we saw with Bennett, which is a John Henryism, you know, perpetually a psychological state of trying to achieve, and no matter how good, no matter how strong, no matter how intelligent, just keeps getting knocked down. And as we know, things can cause hypertension and all sorts of not just psychological, but physiological issues. So first and foremost, I have a couple of action steps. The CEOs need to buy into diversity, equity, and inclusion, why you have this collective, why they are together, and educate her or himself as to what that is really about and the importance of that mission. By the way, it's not just about humanity, but it's good business sense, right? You want the best of your people, and you also want them to be happy and feel included and feel equal and feel cherished and loved. Secondly, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, needs to be the mission within and outside the company. So it's not just something that brings them in business. It's not just the talk that they put out there, but it has to be part of the culture within the company. If it's beauty is only skin deep, and when it is skin deep, then it exudes out as to what it is the company is doing. There should be trainings on implicit and explicit racism, as well as the microaggressions. You know, there was a time where we didn't see that much explicit racism within companies. And then a funny thing happened on the way to the forum. It's called the Trump administration. And then the strategies from managers on cultural sensitivity and competency to bring equity to all workers, especially Black and brown people. And then finally, protecting the mental health of our employees, because your burden is their burden. Let's be clear as to where the burden comes from, who it's projected onto, and how someone else's burden becomes our burden. But keep watching this film over and over again, and you'll realize it ain't you. You are free. It is not just a state of being, but a state of mind. And you may not have control over that state of being, but you certainly must have control over that state of mind. And that comes from employee assistance programs, and it comes from making sure that there are programs, supportive programs, group programs, and as well as therapy that is available for anyone who needs it. Therapy is not a bad word, okay? Therapy is an empowering word and a way that one can achieve complete body, mind, and spiritual control and freedom.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for that insightful look into exactly what's going on inside of individuals as they show up to the work environment. You know, one of the things that I've noticed in the work environments that I've been in is that people don't leave some of themselves home, right? People bring their whole selves to the work environment. And that comes with all the stress and strife that they might be feeling. And sometimes it is misdirected, but at other times, you know, it's just unspoken. People are walking around in pain, especially during these tumultuous times that we're in right now. We are experiencing quite a bit. And a lot of times we just don't know where to go or where to turn to or who to talk to, similar to what Mark was saying as well. What do we do? You know, it's in there, and organizations, believe it or not, can help to bring some of that stuff out. A lot of people don't use their employee assistance program, you know, and that sometimes baffles me, because it's a benefit that individuals that are employees should take advantage of, because they run across people like you, Dr. Jeff, and they run across opportunities to have conversations to what you say, free their minds. You know, it's a state of being, or is it a state of mind? You know, and a lot of times we just need to expose ourselves and be authentic in that. You know, so I appreciate the fact that you spend so much time doing this work and helping people in the way that you do. You know, and help is offered in very different ways, and that's what MRW Consulting Group is all about. We offer help in different ways, and I'd like to turn to Muriel right now and say this. You positioned MRW Consulting Group International at the forefront of the DEI landscape for domestic and global for-profit and nonprofit organizations. And that's powerful in and of itself. You're out there, we're out there, the DEI-Collective is out there. So I'd like to ask if you can elaborate on the services and programs our DEI-Collective provides, and how you go about crafting sustainable, and that's a key word right there, sustainable, not paintball, right? You're just gonna throw it out there and hope it sticks, but sustainable strategies for organizations. How do you and your consultants help organizations address their DEI readiness, risks, and pain points? How do we do that, really?
Well, thank you, Marsha, for that question. And actually, the way we do it is right behind you on the screen. You have our services listed there. But you know, I'd like to respond. I'd like to respond by focusing on this past year, because this was a pivotal year. And I'm not even talking about the pandemic, which of course, you know, just it was icing on the cake. But when you think about this past year, people witnessed a traumatic event, certainly people experience trauma by witnessing this event. And what I'm talking about is the murder of George Floyd. And of course, there were so many others, but the murder of George Floyd, the resulting protests that erupted globally, and the Black Lives Matter movement, has a level of prominence that it hadn't had before. And organizations were caught off guard. They were caught off guard, and for organizations that felt that this is political, this doesn't involve us, this has nothing to do with our business, that was not acceptable because their employees were traumatized and their employees were looking for response. And they were looking for a way to participate in righting what they recognized were a lot of societal wrongs that have been going on for as long as this country has been in existence. And so it was a real pivotal moment for organizations because organizations had to respond to their employees who were pushing for change. And particularly with millennials and with the Generation Zs in the workplace, who do not have the same regard for hierarchy that previous generations have had, who do not have the same boundaries between work and personal life, and particularly as everyone was working from home, those boundaries, to the extent that they were there, they disappeared. And so you had this outcry from the employees in the organization looking to their organizations to take action. And we got frantic calls from some of our clients, as you know, Marsha. What should we do? Or the calls that I love, we need to do training. And of course, we certainly do training. And we agree that training is one of the important tools in the toolkit. And we do, all of the things that you just heard Jeff talk about around, training related to implicit bias, training related to microaggressions and managing those difficult conversations about race. And we do all of that training, and absolutely that is an important intervention.
Yes,
but that's not typically where the work starts. And so a lot of the work started with listening. Started with running listening sessions for a few reasons. One is because you had, as I said, this traumatized workforce that needed a platform to express themselves, to get those emotions out, to be able to talk about them in a healthy, productive way, and then to kind of ease into a conversation about, so what do we do? What does this organization do? What is it that we want to see happen? And how do we get you engaged in this process and get you to participate in some of the solutions? So that's where a lot of our work started. And that, of course, opens up the next step, which is to really do a deep dive into organizations, these what we call organizational assessments, which sometimes start with the readiness study, right? To see where is your organization and what are you ready to do in the way of change. But really diving deep and looking at both from a quantitative as well as qualitative levels, what are the opportunities in your organization? What are the needs and what are the opportunities? Where do we need to focus? Some of that, as you know, Marsha, was kind of pulling that DEI strategy out of the bottom of the file cabinet and dusting it off and looking at it fresh. But for many organizations, it was starting that process. They may not have had a comprehensive DEI strategy. And so we really needed to look at creating one, and looking at what are the needs, what can we do? And I would say in almost all cases, where the areas of opportunity fall is usually in three primary categories. First is workforce diversity. And that means looking at your organization and saying, do you actually have people of color reflected in your organization? Do you have diversity in your organization? And what we often see is that many organizations do, but it's sitting at the bottom of the org chart. And as you go up that org chart, you see less and less. The ranks of diverse employees become pretty thin, particularly as you get to the senior leadership levels and you get to the board levels. And so a lot of work needs to be done there to bring diversity into the organization, which there's an education around that, right? In terms of how do you find that talent, attract that talent to your organization. And then that leads to the next area of opportunity, which many organizations share, and that is really doing a deep dive into the workplace culture. What are the practices, the policies, the programs that are in place that influence the employee experience, and in particular that influence the experience for employees of color in your organization? Do people feel that they belong? Do they feel that they can actively participate and contribute to decisions that are made? Do they feel like they really have a place in your organization and a seat at the table? And so there's a lot of work that we do around assessing and then making recommendations that address the workplace culture. And then the third area that often comes up, and this came up a lot over the past year in particular, was the need for alignment in the external messaging and branding with the internal messaging and branding. And without calling out any specific examples, we can probably all think of a few high-profile examples this year where organizations went out with really strong messages of solidarity. We support Black Lives Matter. We support the protesters. And their employees spoke up pretty vocally and said, that doesn't align with what we see going on inside the organization. And they called it out. And so that need for the alignment around what is the brand message that you're putting out into the public space, and does it align with the actual experience of people in your organization, people of color in your organization? Do they feel that there's a message that's in sync in that regard? So those are all of the areas where we do a lot of work, both assessing first, where are you, and where are you strong, and where are you missing some opportunities, where are the gaps, and then what can we do to start to close those gaps. And I would say, and I know my colleagues have said this, but I'm going to repeat it. What is so exciting about the DEI Collective is that we really have taken what we believe is an innovative approach to this work by bringing in the creative expression, which is really different for organizations, right? You know, we can sit at the conference table with you and we can talk about and hash out a DEI strategy. But now you introduce these other elements of creative expression. You bring the arts into this, films like Burden, you know, this powerful song, You Can't Wrong My Rights, and customized content like that. And it helps to open up a dialogue around topics that people are intimidated to talk about. Race, racism, social injustice. These are healthy conversations to have in order to move forward in a productive way. And we believe that we have a formula that, you know, you bring the creative expression, you combine that with the holistic approach we take to DEI strategy, and you have a really powerful formula. And that's what we get really excited about. And I'm going to stop talking now because I could talk about this for another hour. And I know that I've said enough, so I'll turn it back to you, Marsha.
Well, thank you, Muriel. And it's never enough for me when it comes to DEI. My passion just overflows. But you said something, and I'm going to capsulize it if you don't mind. Don't just talk about it, be about it. You know, and that's what I heard coming from you. And a lot of organizations haven't grasped that concept just yet. But in light of what's going on, they feel the need to do something. And something is better than nothing at all. Though we push the envelope at MRW Consulting Group because we have to, because the need for healing is very, very real. So I want to turn it over quickly to a gentleman that I've known for many, many years, and I won't add too many more minis there. But his name is Charles M. Peck. We call him Chuck. And Chuck is a part of the DEI Collective. I call him actually my secret weapon. And I'll tell you why. Chuck, you are a well-seasoned and respected senior consultant for the DEI Collective. Your career has afforded you the opportunity to lead companies from the C-suite level of 2 global public companies, president and SVP of 2 private equity companies, and COO, that's Chief Operating Officer, and you taught me that, Chuck, of the AICPA, the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. So listen, Chuck, I want to ask you a question. When it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, how would you articulate what the CEO really wants to hear as it relates to the business case for them to invest their companies, and I'll repeat that, their companies, time and resources in this work? Why should they bother, sir? And what do they really care about?
A couple of answers to your question. I'm going to first tell you a little story. The last public company that I ran, a global public company, was over $200 million. The SEC had displaced the board that was there, and they wanted an independent board, and they had displaced the founder and CEO of the company. I was there on board 2 weeks when the board told me they wanted to displace my general counsel and my chief financial officer. This is among 5 executives. My general counsel is Hispanic and a woman. My CFO is a woman with an MBA and a CPA. The other 3 were men. I said, are you guys crazy? I mean, does that make any sense? You know, the risk that we're talking about? You should have done that before I came on board, not telling me to do it when I came on board. We didn't do it. And actually, Marsha came down and I put together a host of cross-functional teams to address a lot of the issues that we're talking about, which I've done in previous places where Marsha and I have worked. But to answer your question, I'll cite a few studies. There are lots of studies, but McKinsey in more recent years has studied companies that have better earnings and more profitable in the top quartile are the more diverse, cultural, racial companies that have embraced diversity, equity, and inclusion within their culture. And that study, by the way, is called Diversity Wins. You can look it up, that McKinsey did. And another company, Citicorp, did research on the economy losing $16 trillion over the last 20 years. 16 trillion, that's with a T. And that encompassed wage growth, educational access, home ownership, and minority-owned businesses. Their objective is to reverse that trend and make $5 trillion advance in the next 10 years. So, you know, that's been a problem, and a lot of the companies such as Bank of America and Citicorp are actually starting to address that. And if any of you are familiar with Michael Porter, you know, a guru in terms of strategy, in 2011, he put together a U.S. social index of 163 countries with 50 matrix. The United States ranked poorly, to tell you the truth. They had slipped from number 28 to 19 in 2011. And that's just in terms of those 50 indexes on a macro level, we're talking about the well-being of companies. So not only are companies more profitable that are more diverse and inclusive, not only can you reverse the losses that the country has been incurring by not investing and focusing in the right resource applications, but you also have a social well-being index that can be addressed to improve the well-being of workforces and people within those workforces. So to answer your question, when your OD or organization development or HR group wants to undertake a diversity initiative, an inclusive initiative, somewhere along the way, if it's 20,000, if it's 30,000, or whatever the case might be, the CEO or the COO or the CFO is going to say, what are we getting for it? What's the payback? And the payback they want to know is companies that do this are more profitable. Companies that do this have greater earnings. So there's a business case to be made. And I think Jeff said that earlier, and I'm building on really what Jeff had said. So it's good business, not only good business, but it's socially something that we should be doing too.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Chuck. And I do want to be mindful of time. We're at the 7:59 mark. Chuck, what you said is very important for organizations to understand. The CEO is always going to know what the return on the investment is. When I speak to organizations about that, I talk about the health and well-being and stability of the individual employees that you have employed with you. And that is the most valuable resource that you have, the people who you employ. But I'm not going to take up too much more time. I want to respect our guests' time, and I'm going to begin to wrap this up. But first, I want to say, Muriel, Chuck, Dr. Jeff, and MK, thank you for joining me in this conversation. And thank you for sure for being a part of the DEI Collective. I don't distance myself away from us. We are one big, happy group of individuals with a passion to do one thing and one thing only, make people's lives better and treat each other as you would want others to treat you. That is what the DEI Collective is all about. So listen, I would like to thank all of you again for joining me. And as I am sure you know, coming up in January is Martin Luther King's birthday. In February is Black History Month. And in March is Women's Month. We are all aware that celebratory conversations, events, and activities will be taking place. So if by chance you are interested in screening the film burden and having MRW Consulting Group maybe facilitate a conversation of the film or partner with you to help support your DEI work initiatives and the passion that you have within inside of you, then I'll say give us a call. Contact us. We're here, we're available, and we care. The information will be provided to you in a survey that we're going to provide to you. We want to know what you felt about the conversation, what you felt about the film, what you felt about the panelists. We want to know because it's about getting better in everything that we do. Nobody has all the answers, but together we can be a strong voice out there. So I want to talk to you about filling out the survey when you receive it. Also want to thank you. Real simple, right? Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you and possibly working with you in the near future. My name is Marsha R. I'm a DEI senior consultant and HR professional. You have just experienced the MRW Consulting Group DEI Collective. I want y'all to do something for us, right? I want y'all to do this. Can we get some of this? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Be authentic in everything you do, and people appreciate you for who you are. I'll turn it back over to Nathan Hale Williams to close the conversation. Peace, my brothers and sisters.
Wow, what a great program. Another great program. I just want to give a special shout out to Marsha R for all of her, for the great introduction, first of all, and then all of her partnership and support of our efforts from day one, and then bringing the DEI Collective to us in this great partnership. We really enjoyed this program. I'm saying hi to you. I'm out writing the next thing out in Santa Barbara, so it's been great to virtually join everyone. I just really appreciate the interest in this film. Sorry for my casual writing nature, but I was there in business spirit. So without prolonging it any further, please contact the DEI Collective for additional partnership opportunities, and we look forward to working with you in a great year called 2021. Thank you.